Welcome to Stayf Draws. I'm Stayf, a Dutch illustrator and animator, and in this video I'm going to paint this painting done by Mary Blair, and I'm going to paint it in Procreate using the brush set Stayf-Mary Blair. So let's get started. So in this video I'm going to paint this image Mary Blair did for Cinderella. And it's the scene that Cinderella is taken into the pumpkin-like carriage with the horses to the castle. And I created a new brush to do some of the dry brushes in the sections above. And it's added to the Stayf-Mary Blair brush set. And I'll leave a link in the description box down below. I'm just gonna go over some of the images. This is Mary Blair when she was on a goodwill trip for Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros, and here she is maybe in Argentina. I'm not quite sure. I think this was taken, this is a picture that was taken for Life magazine. And I'm just gonna go through some of her pictures. And she made this kind of art for pre-production. She was assigned to sketch out ideas and color schemes for the scenes in the movie. So all of these paintings never ended up on screen. And this is a different approach. I'm not quite sure if these are the real colors of this painting, because when you look at other art in the same series, here's the same carriage going to the castle, and you know, it has a different color scheme. It's more in a green bluish tone than this tone. And when you look at her art, it seems like it's very simple, and the original pieces were very small. Here's another beautiful example of the carriage going to the castle, and here is I think the garden scene, and here you see, and it's very simple. It's Cinderella sobbing. This is another great example of, you know, creating a scene, creating a nice color scheme, and the characters and everything is very simple. But, you know, it was more about the design and the colors used, and the characters were secondary to the overall design. Here's another lovely scene, and you see that she is using the same kind of color scheme. This was the night scene with the prince, and here's just some other artwork. This was for Three Caballeros, I think. This is a piece she did for Alice in Wonderland, and here she uses a split complementary color scheme, and I already made a video about that. I'll leave a link in the description box down below. And here's a scene from Peter Pan. I think this is Cinderella as well, when they are dancing in the clouds. Here's another piece she did for Peter Pan, and you know, the designs are very simple, but it's more about the color and creating a mood for the scene. And I think this was for Melody Time. And here you can see her use of, because this is the original, and I can find a lot of these images when you just type in Google Mary Blair concept art or original art. You can find these pictures on sites they sell these images on. But we're going to take a look at this image. We're going to paint this, and I'm just gonna go over just figuring out how she painted this image, and I'm gonna use the Stayf-Mary Blair brush set, and that's available on Gumroad. There are around 19 brushes, because I added the Stayf-Mary Blair to it. So I took a picture of a book, and this is the actual painting, and I'm not quite sure if these are the original colors, because I have another version of it that has a more blue tone to it. But we're just going to use this image to paint the Mary Blair painting. What I'm first going to do is open up Procreate and then make a new canvas, and I'm choosing for A4 size. And then I'm just going to rotate it into landscape mode. What I'm first going to do is import the photo, and you can do that by pressing on Add, then Insert Photo, and then you can go to the camera roll and import the photo, and it's up here. And we're just going to use this, and I'm going to trace the outlines because we're not going to totally, draw this image. Just going to go through the image and just find out how she painted this scene. And she worked with gouache, which is an opaque medium, or in those days they called it opaque watercolors. And she built up this scene from the back to the front. So I think she first made a sketch, a very simple sketch of the scene, and then she painted over it. So she started out with the background, and you can see there's a lot of structure. So she first laid down the scene with a flat color, and then with a wet brush she made the structure of the sky, and this is in green, so we're just going to use this color scheme. And then after that she painted over it. It's a very graphical way of painting, because it is really about the shapes and the colors, and of course the action, because this image has a lot of action. Because I'm just gonna select a new layer and just gonna go over it with a brush. Just gonna choose another color, because these are just the basic shapes of this entire image, and this is where the action, because it's going that way, and everything is pointing that way, so it's very clear action. And this is of course a night scene, so a lot of the images are very dark, and she uses this as a kind of a silhouette, to make it pop out a little bit more. And this is lit by the moon. So this is just a very simplification of the image. What I'm now going to do is first make an outline, and I'm gonna set this layer with the picture in it to around 50%. Then I'm gonna choose the Stayf 6B pencil. I'm just gonna use black, pure black, and I'm just gonna trace it. You always have to make sure that you're on the right layer. And this is not, about making the drawing, but working with the brushes and to achieve the effect of Mary Blair. So I'm just gonna fast forward this. So now I've made this sketch, and I'm going to leave a link to the original image of the picture I took of a book of this image, so you can use it and download it to your iPad in your Photos app, because what I'm now going to do is throw away this image and just leave the outlines. And I'm going to do a split screen, so you have to swipe up and then select your Photos app and then drag it to the left. If you're left-handed, it's better, to do a split screen to the right of the screen. I'm just going to use this as a reference for the colors, so I know what to look at. Just to be safe, I'm going to first lower the opacity of the outline around 50%, and I'm going to swipe from right to left, and then you can lock the layer so you cannot draw on this layer. First thing I'm going to do is set the basic color of this image, and that's the background color, and it's green. So I'm first going to select the background color and then select a color from the color wheel, and I'm just going to choose a middle green color, and this is just going to be the basic color of the entire image. I'm going to use the Mary Blair ink set, and I'm first want to have, because that's when you're doing something digital, it always looks too digital, and when you paint something on paper, you want it to be perfect, but it never will be perfect because you're working with brushes, and Mary Blair, painted with opaque gouache, and you see a lot of difference in the colors, so they're not really flat. So when you really zoom in, you can see the structure of the brush. And I want to have the same feeling when I'm doing this in Procreate. So what I'm first going to select is a block out brush, and that's the Stayf Charcoal Blair block. This is a little bit too heavy, because I'm going to select this color, and I'm going to choose a little bit of darker color. You can see what this is, a really a brush to block out bigger colors, and I'm now on, I have to create a new layer because I'm still on the locked layer. So I'm gonna drag it underneath the sketch layer, and then I'm just going to use the rough block brush, and there you can see that it is a little bit too rough, and I have set my brush to a preview, and you can do that by pressing on actions, go to prefs, and now I can see the brush cursor, and I really like that, so I can see the outline and how big my brush is. You can change that by turning on brush cursor. So this is a little bit too rough, and have to make the colors a little bit darker. I have another brush, and that has a lighter structure to it, and that works a little bit better. So I'm first want to, build up a kind of a structure, that it doesn't look too digital. And we're going to work in layers, because you're working digital, why should you do it on one layer? Doesn't make any sense. So with this brush you can create a nice structure, and when you look at this image, here in this part of the mountain it's a little bit lighter. And I have different brushes to achieve that effect. That's the Stayf-Mary Blair taper. So I'm gonna select a lighter color, and that's a little bit too light, and that has a nice structure to it, so you can, you know, let the brush do the work for you. And with these brushes, you know, you can create nice structures. And there's a little bit of yellow in the left corner, so I'm just going to keep it in the same position here, but here you can change the color, then it still has the same value. And that way, you know, you can build up your colors. And here it's going to be very light. And I just do it in, you know, single strokes, because these are a little bit of a dry brush effect. And if you do that with real gouache, you know, you don't use that much, or you don't use water at all. You're just gonna paint with the gouache out of the tube. So I'm going to paint, also going to paint the moon, but I'm going to use a different brush. That's the Stayf-Mary Blair taper, and that's a nice structured brush, and it picks up paint that's underneath it. You know, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because there's a bit of variation in the colors. So now we have painted the background, and now we're going to draw the forest, and we're going to select a new layer. And first we have to make some flat colors with it. I'm going to use the Stayf-Mary Blair Opaque, and that's a tapered brush. And we first need to select the color. I already made a palette of Mary Blair. I think it's going to be this color. It's a bit of between green and blue. And I'm first going to, you know, paint the entire structure of the forest. And, you know, this is a little bit too light, but we can change it later. And when you have a closed shape like this, you can use color drop. And color drop, you just pick the color circle and just drop in the color. And now it fills everything, but then you need to use the color drop threshold. So you have to swipe it to the left, and then you created an entire color. And this we're going to use, to paint the forest. And I'm going to use alpha lock. And with alpha lock you can paint within the object you have painted. So I'm going to swipe from left to right, and then you have created alpha lock. When you tap on the layer, you can also select alpha lock from the menu on the left. So when you press on it again, alpha lock is turned off, and here you can turn it on. When you look at the forest or at the trees, it has a lot of structure to it as well, and that's because she painted with a little bit more water, with a little bit more dilution. But we're first going to make this forest have a little bit more of a structure, and I've made two brushes. That's the Stayf-Mary Blair wash taper and the Stayf-Mary Blair wash. And I'm just gonna use the Stayf-Mary Blair wash, and it is a structured brush, and with that you can do some nice washes. So I'm gonna select a darker color, and I think it is a little bit more to the green side. And when you paint within an alpha lock, you're just painting inside the object. So I'm first going to lay down some different colors, some variations, and I have set the brush to like 40% opacity. Just gonna zoom in a little. You can also, make it smaller. And just play around with it. So to get some variation in your colors. And you can also, follow the action of the lines in the forest. So it's really like, building up your colors, because you don't want it to be perfect, to get more of an analog feel, like it has been painted on paper. And the foreground I'm not painting, because I'm going to paint that on a separate layer. And that's really black. I'm going to make it a little bit more grainy, and for that I'm going to use the Stayf Grain Stucco. I'm just going to adjust the opacity a little bit. And in this way, you know, you create more layered piece of art than just flat colors. And it's a pretty dark image. There are some highlights. Right here, the moon is hitting. And here is going to be pure white. Here it's a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to do the highlights, and I'm going to use a different color for that, or a different brush, and that's going to be the Stayf-Mary Blair dry taper. First going to paint this, because here is touching it with white. This brush has a nice structure to it. It's more of a dry brush effect, and it is tapered, so when you press lightly, the brush stroke is smaller. When you look at it, it's painted with a little bit more water. So I'm just going to use a different brush for that. That's the Stayf-Mary Blair round. Also has a little bit of a structure to it. But a little bit more dilution. Here it has a little bit more of a green in it, and I'm just gonna select a color from the background just to start out. I'm now using the Stayf-Mary Blair dry taper because it has a little bit more of a structure to it, and this is just the moon hitting this image, and it's going to be a little bit lighter. So you just have to touch it lightly, and you know, the structure of the brush, that's the most important, because when you overdo it, you lose the structure of the brush. I'm gonna paint these parts, and that's done with a different brush. Just gonna use the Stayf-Mary Blair Opaque, because that's a really basic tapered brush, a basic tapered gouache brush. That's a little bit too big. You have to do it in one go, because she painted this very fast. Now I'm going to do the darker parts, and that's almost pure black. And I'm gonna choose a new brush I made, and it's added to the Stayf-Mary Blair brush set, and it is a different kind of brush. I'm just gonna show you. When you tap on the brush, you can see the source, and it has a very structured brush, and it's vertical, and it's a tapered brush, so you can create nice effects with it. So now I'm gonna paint, the structure of the trees. And the harder you press, the bigger the brush will get. You have to do it just in one swoosh, because then you get the nice structure of the brush. You can make it smaller, if there are smaller things in it. This is better, to do it in one go, to make it flow better. So it's always great, to study other artists and, learn from how they set up painting. This is going to be a lot darker. Also can paint in the ground here, because that's going to be black. I'll leave some of the structure in. Here she also painted it with some dry brush technique. So I'm gonna use a light gray, bluish light gray. And I'm gonna make a new layer for the silhouette of the carriage and also the trees in the back, and that's painted with an opaque brush, and I'm gonna use the Stayf-Mary Blair opaque for that. And it's not pure white. What I'm now going to do, because I cannot really read the line art I've made, so I'm going to turn off these two layers so that I still can see the line art. And I'm first going to make a flat painting of the line art, and these are just some indications of the painting. So I'm just going to use the pressure sensitivity of the Apple Pencil, because this is a tapered brush. The lighter you press, the smaller the brush will get. So I need to do this in one go. Otherwise you will lose the flow of the painting. And Mary Blair also did this in one swoosh. So now I've created the silhouette of the painting, and what I'm now going to do is set this layer to alpha lock. You can do that by, swiping from left to right with two fingers on the layer. Now I can turn on both of these layers again, and now we're going to do the structure of the carriage and of the horses. And I'm now just going to look at the original illustration. And you see there are some gradients and some structure in the painting. So I'm gonna select more of a white to achieve that effect. I'm gonna use the Stayf grain stucco Blair taper for that. Just change the size a little bit. First going to paint the highlights. There's also a highlight in the guy that's on the couch. And also on the horses. I'm not gonna fit it out perfectly because I still need the structure. Otherwise it will become too flat. Just touch it lightly and then you get a little bit more of the structure of the brush. I'm gonna change the brush again to the Stayf-Mary Blair because that has a little bit more of a structure to it. There are also some variations in the grays, so I'm gonna color select it with my finger and then make it a little bit darker. You just have to play around with the brushes to, you know, get some nice effects. This is just copying this image of Mary Blair, but you know, it's always great to study how she, you know, painted it. Here it's a little bit darker even. And I'm going to lower the outline. So I first need to unlock it, otherwise you cannot change everything or change the opacity of the layer. So I have to swipe from right to left to unlock it. So press on unlock to unlock the layer, and then you can change the opacity of the layer. Now I'm going to use the Stayf Dip Pen Blair, and that's an ink brush, just to paint out some of the outlines in the image. For instance, in the carriage. And you have to stay on the right layer. This has a little bit of a structure to it. And it is a tapered brush. So when you press harder, and here's the lettern, just select white. And she painted some, you know, outlines, you know, to differentiate different parts of the image. It's always best to do it in one flow. Otherwise your painting or your inks will be, if you do it, you know, very slowly, you don't have that much control. So I'm gonna turn off the alpha lock. Still do some final details in the painting. Here it's a little bit darker, so I'm going to use the Stayf-Mary Blair brush just to paint in some structure. And this shadow part needs to be a little bit stronger so that it reads better. So basically it's doing the flat colors, and on top of that you can add the structured brushes. I'm gonna make this blend a little bit better. Just select the color. And this is how you can paint in the style of Mary Blair. This is just a study of this image, but you get the basic concept of how she painted stuff, and of course the designs she did were amazing. So there's just a lot you can learn from the paintings of Mary Blair. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell, because each time I upload a new video you get a notification. Drawing is fun and practice makes perfect. See you next time. Doodles!